Good morning. How's it going?
It's going. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Hey,
Thanks for
Angela.
sharing your pictures from Washington, man. That looks like a pretty amazing.
Oh wow. I'm still like just in awe of that whole experience.
That's excellent.
How was your week?
It was good. These days, I'm going up to Huntsville once a week, so it's half my week is up there. So Tuesday through Thursday. So, but it's going well. Internship's going well, and yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Are you still doing the magic mushroom stuff?
The psilocybin study.
Hmm.
So that's actually coming out in excuse me, that's coming out in May or maybe April.
Yeah.
So Johns Hopkins is releasing the research then, and I'm interested in pursuing. I think psychedelic assisted therapy is going to help a lot of people. So I'm in conversation with some people who are doing uh, like there's one guy in Birmingham who's set up a studio for psychedelic assisted therapy. And right now, the only thing that's legal is ketamine. But once
Right.
that other stuff comes online, he's ready to go. So I'm excited about that. I think it's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, I've been doing a little research on it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I think you told me about a documentary. It's interesting because
Yeah.
I'm a big Star Trek nerd. And on the newest iteration, Discovery, the navigator, Paul Stamets,
Yes, that's his
is
name.
named after Paul Stamets.
Right. And they're zipping across the universe on the mycelial network.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
I was thinking because I've also gone back. Demetrius hasn't really watched a lot of them, but we're going back and watch some other iterations. And
Mhm.
like they could have really used that mycelial network in Discovery. And the fact that not Discovery, yeah, well, that was Janeway.
Yeah. Right. When they're stuck,
Voyager.
Voyager, yeah, they're stuck on the other side of the
Yeah, in
universe.
the other quadrant. And it's interesting to me because
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute,
Thank you.
Discovery actually happened. It initially happened before any of that happened because
Right.
it's actually pre the original Star Trek.
Yeah, they have to go back and retcon why they don't have this technology since it's yeah. But I've watched the first couple of seasons. I haven't watched the most recent season. I really liked it.
Okay.
I thought it was
It's
good.
it's it's awesome, and I like it for a lot of reasons. It's
Hmm.
not as misogynistic as the other iterations are. It's very,
Right.
very female led. It's really, really diverse. I mean,
Yeah.
it it took Gene Roddenberry's idea and just flipped it and made it even better.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you talking about?
Star Trek Discovery.
Have you seen it, Paula?
I don't get into science fiction. I know that's heresy at St. Junia. I like fantasy, but science fiction just doesn't do it for me.
No, we're tolerant. Everyone has their different jam. That's fine.
I really need a good murder in a book to enjoy it.
I hear you.
But on the flip side, I've also been going back and watching a lot of Bewitched episodes. And my friend D brought something up to me that I had never paid attention before. Can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. But on
What I didn't hear the title. What was the title?
Bewitched with
Bewitched. Oh, okay.
yeah. And it's amazing to me how purposefully she and William Asher, who is the producer, who was her husband, integrated Black people into the show. And they were not maids, they were not servants, they were in the same places as the white people, whether they were in the theater, whether they were at the airport. You're always going to see this random Black person in there. And it's almost like, let's just kind of open the door and see where this goes.
Wow.
Interesting. I'd never noticed that with Bewitched.
I had never noticed it either until she brought it up. But even the episode when they went to the orphanage, there was a little Black boy in there. There's an episode when Aunt Clara, who I think is hilarious, had came to visit them, and they went there and went to meet his parents at the airport. There was a black woman in the airport. There's an episode when they're in the theater, and I'm like, I never noticed this before, because there are a lot of shows where in that era where you're not going to see black people, period, unless they're the maid.
Yeah, it was just invisibility, right? Yeah. Well, I guess a lot of people know, but the fact that Star Trek was the first interracial kiss demonstrated on television too. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Hey, Megan, how's it going?
Hey, doing good. How are you?
Doing good. How are things on the West Coast?
Pretty good. We just got Kira a big girl bed, and she was so excited. It was
Dun,
adorable.
dun, dun.
Yeah. The only thing that she said was that it needed to be green. So it was
That's
great.
either a very exciting time or a very traumatic time. Our Rachel was excited about getting her. I'm getting feedback. Is everybody else?
No.
Okay. Our Rachel was so excited about getting her big girl bed until she laid down in it for about 15 minutes and then wanted to go back upstairs to the baby bed.
I mean, we did our best to psych her up about it, like we attempted to take her to IKEA, but the supply chain is crazy right now. Everything is like unavailable. So no, Melissa is trying to get on my table. Anyway, and we told her, we're gonna get you a big girl bed. This means you're a big girl. And she was just like there for it. And she was upset when we didn't find anything. So we immediately ordered something online afterwards. We let her pick it out. We let her look on the phone and see. Anyway.
Well, congratulations to Kira.
Yeah, she's still asleep, so
that's good.
It's that good mattress.
I've got to go let a cat in.
Speaking of supply chain problems, is anyone else noticing things that are usually in heavy supply that are missing? Like I went to Sam's the other day and couldn't find bacon.
Whoa.
Pillsbury biscuits have been gone for some time now. This is starting to get kind of creepy.
Yeah, for a little while there were no miniature marshmallows in any of the stores in any of the brands.
Wow.
So if you happened to be looking for mini marshmallows, they weren't there. There are some at Aldi now if you are in the market.
Maurice likes Lunchables. There are no Lunchables to be found. This is it's a lot of weird things that are normally in big supplier that are just totally missing.
Well, if you want to panic, find out that cat litter's in low supply. I paid more for cat litter this week than I've ever paid. All the cheap brands were gone.
Where was I? I was somewhere the other day, and there were a lot of feral cats. Maybe people getting rid of their cats because they can find litter. But I saw about 5 feral cats the other day.
So thank you all for being here today. Let's go ahead and start worship. Melissa's not going to be with us today. She's on her way to Denver for her classes. So we'll wish good traveling mercies for her. Excuse me. We'll get the liturgy on the screen. And if we can just kind of keep the same, whoops, where is it? There it is. Keep the same roles. And whenever you're ready, Tony.
Good morning. Today is the birthday of Father Antonio Vieira in 1608. He was of African and Portuguese descent and was a diplomat as well as a priest. His outspoken sermons made him enemies among slave traders and the Inquisition. He also fought against the exploitation of indigenous people in Brazil. Greetings. Come, fellow travelers, God has set a feast for weary pilgrims.
Let us come together and share what we have. Let us join our voices in praise.
Lift up your hearts.
We lift up our hearts to our God.
Let us give thanks to the source of life.
It is right to give our thanks and praise.
It is right and a good and joyful thing always and everywhere to give you thanks, Almighty God. Weeping may pass the night,
Yet in the morning, joy.
Psalms 22, 23 through 31. I will exalt you, ark of safety, because you have pulled me up and have not let my enemies rejoice over me.
Healing one, my God, I cried to you for help, and you healed me.
Ever living God, you brought my soul up from Sheol. You preserved my life from descent to the pit.
Sing praises to the faithful God, all of you, her faithful. Give thanks, remembering her holiness.
For her fury is for a moment, her favor for a lifetime.
Weeping may pass the night, yet in the morning, joy.
Now I said in my prosperity, I shall never be shaken. Majestic one, by your favor, you established me as a mighty mountain.
You hid your face. I was terrified.
To you, Most High, I call, and to you, my sovereign, I appeal. What profit is there in my shed blood, in my descent to the pit?
Will the dust praise you or declare your faithfulness?
Hear, Holy One of old, be my help. You have turned my wailing into dancing.
From me you have taken my sackcloth, and you have clothed me with joy.
So that my glory might praise you and not keep silent.
Glorious one, my God, forever will I praise you.
Weeping may pass the night,
Yet in the morning, joy.
2 Kings 5:1. Naaman, commander of the army of the ruler of Aram, was a great man in the sight of his master and highly esteemed, because through him the Holy One had given victory to Aram. The man, a great warrior, was diseased in his skin. Now the Aramean troops went out and took captive from the land of Israel a young girl, and she was placed before Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would take his skin disease away." So Naaman went in and told his master the girl from the land of Israel had said this and this. Then Naaman came with his horses and chariot and stood at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him who said, "Go, wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be unblemished." But Naaman became angry and left, saying, "Look here, I thought that for me he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of the Most High, his God, and would wave his hands over the spot and take away the skin disease. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be restored?" Then he turned and went away in rage. But his slaves approached him and said, "My master, were it a great thing the prophet told you to do, would you not have done it? How much more when he said to you, 'Wash and be restored'?" So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. His flesh was renewed like the flesh of a little boy, and he was restored.
Luke 4:22-30. Everyone was raving about Jesus. So impressed were they by the gracious words flowing from his lips. They said, "This is Joseph's son, isn't it?" Then Jesus said to them, "Undoubtedly, you will quote this, saying to me, 'Doctor, heal yourself. Do here in your hometown what you've heard you did in Capernaum.'" He said, "I assure you that no prophet is welcome in the prophet's hometown. And I can assure you that there were many widows in Israel during Elijah's time, when it didn't rain for 3.5 years, and there was a great food shortage in the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them, but only to a widow in the city of Zarephath, in the region of Sidon. There were also many persons with skin diseases in Israel during the time of the prophet Elisha, but none of them were cleansed. Instead, Naaman the Syrian was cleansed. When they heard this, everyone in the synagogue was filled with anger. They rose up and ran him out of town. They led him to the crest of the hill on which their town had been built so that they could throw him off the cliff. But he passed through the crowd and went on his way. May God add blessings to the reading of this word.
Thanks be to God.
Father Antonio Vieira wrote, "We are what we do. What we don't do doesn't exist. Therefore, we only exist on days when we do. On days when we don't do, we simply endure."
So thank you all. Excuse me. Thank you all for getting us started in worship this morning. I'm getting several messages that say my connection is unstable. So I may freeze, just giving you a head. Let's go to God in a time of prayer. I'll get us started. And if those of you watching would like to lift up a prayer concern or something you're grateful for, feel free to do so in the chat. If you're on Facebook, you can certainly put in the comments any prayer requests you have, or if you're on YouTube, you can do the same thing. Also, if you are watching on streaming, either on Facebook or YouTube, if you just click like, let us know that you're with us. Maybe tell us where you're watching from. That way we can count you among our worshiping community today. That would be helpful. If you're on Zoom, feel free to put in the chat any prayer requests you have. Let's go to God in prayer. Creator of the universe and author of our lives, you are the source of all that is. You are the ground of being. And when we direct our attention to you and speak our words, we don't do so thinking that they are some kind of magic, but that you have created all there is and sent your word among us to walk with us. So by speaking our love for the world, we connect more deeply with your love for all that is. We ask that you give grace and healing to those who need it. We're especially mindful of the pain of the whole world, of climate change and COVID, of the economy, of places where we see obvious suffering, places of war, political tension, places where there's lots of grief, but there's also private pain that many of us carry around that seems invisible to the world. But we know that it's all visible to you, that you are conscious of every ounce of suffering and are already moving toward healing and wholeness. So we lift up to you ourselves, and we lift up to you the hurts of the world. And I invite those of you listening to share.
John and Diane Bredehoff.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Bill Horton and family.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Gratitude for the healing of Stanley Hurst.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Christina O'Quinn.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Vicky Sparks.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Traveling mercies for Melissa and all those who are all of those who are part of her class in their studies.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For peace in the Ukraine.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For parents dealing with potty training and other transitional phases.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For all the healthcare workers in our healthcare system.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Gratitude for the buds on the trees and the signs of awakening spring.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For inflation to go down.
Lord, hear our prayer.
God, for all those.
One
Oh.
more. Bill Curtis, who has COVID and pneumonia at Bibb Medical Center.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Jeff McDaniel, recovering from COVID for the third time.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Gracious God, for all those who are named and those prayers that are unnamed, for the things that we don't know how to put into words, we give you thanks that you hear and that you answer. And we join Jesus in the prayer that he taught us. Holy One, our Mother and Father, let your name be revered. Let your kingdom come. Let your will be done on earth as it is in the heavens. Give us today the bread we need for today, and forgive our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory now and forever. Amen. So I've been looking forward to this story because I love this story. This is the story of the healing of Naaman, and the thing is, it's not well known, even though Jesus, in one of the famous events of Jesus' life, he goes to his hometown and he preaches a sermon and he nearly gets thrown off a cliff, and he mentions Naaman. So I kind of have the sense that the story is important because Jesus almost dies because of it. And the stories are related. They're both kind of about people thinking they're too good for a miracle. And all of that might sound a little odd. I mean, thinking you're too good for a miracle. Part of it is about there's so much language about status in this story. You have Naaman, who's the commander of a great army, who apparently goes and raids Israel. And there's also the language of enslavement. So he goes and he captures people when they raid Israel, and the captured prisoners are enslaved. There's a little girl who sees him, and in spite of the fact that this is her enemy, this is someone who has enslaved her people, who has raided her town, probably killed her parents, right? Because it's just a little girl. She says, if only you knew the holy man in my hometown, he would probably be able to take care of your skin disease. He tells this to Naaman's wife, and he hears her. He listens to her, which is maybe kind of a surprise. There's kind of a chain of, it's almost like telephone. The girl tells Naaman's wife tells Naaman tells the king, and the king says, okay, fine, go see this holy person in Israel. Again, this is a town that they've been raiding, even though, it's talking about Naaman as a great man. He's an enemy of Israel. It's also interesting, I think, that the narrator says that God gave Naaman these victories. In other words, God's not just on the side of Israel. God's sometimes on other people's side. I mean, here's the author saying early on, God's not necessarily flag waving for your country. You would think that maybe that would be a lesson Christians in the United States could learn. But Naaman is allowed to go to seek out this holy person, Elisha, who, by the way, he's Elijah's understudy, or he was Elijah's disciple. He's now the big prophet in Israel. And Naaman brings his entourage. Again, this has to be an impressive sight, coming with his chariots and the things that he's going to offer Elisha to buy this miracle. He's planning to pay, by the way, after he gets healed. So he and his procession all come and they stand outside Elisha's door. And this is where I think it's so rich. Elisha sends him. Elisha doesn't come out himself and receive him like the great big general that he expects. He expects these honors, right? He expects Elisha to be deferential and to respect him coming with all this treasure. And Elisha just sends a messenger. Says, "Yeah, go tell him to wash in the Jordan. He'll be fine." Naaman is outraged, and you get a sense he doesn't exactly say. He says, "I got rivers in my own hometown," right? But what he doesn't say is he's just been slighted that Elisha has sent a messenger to talk to him. He says, "Our rivers are better than your river. I expected him at least to come out and do some hocus pocus and wave his hand around, be slain in the spirit, speak in tongues, lay hands on, anoint with oil." He was expecting the show, right? He was expecting the proper show that a miracle deserves. And Elisha says, "Go take a bath." So Naaman is furious. And it's interesting that, so here's the general, I guess, because he doesn't have all his army. He's not like threatening to burn Elisha's house down. He's just offended and about to go home pouting. But you have a sense like this, there's an actual threat here, right? Naaman shows up at Elisha's door. He's been raiding Elisha's country to ask a favor, and Elisha slights him in this way. So Naaman turns around and he's about to head back. And again, the people who speak up are the people on the margins, the enslaved, the people who are lower status. And they say to him again, in this gracious way, "Look, if he had told you to do something complicated, you would have done it, right? I mean, if he had told you to stand on your head and told you to do all these things," that's what Naaman was expecting, right? If they had told you to do something complicated, you would have gladly done it to get rid of this disease. How much more then when it's just go take a bath? And so Naaman swallows his pride and he goes and bathes in the Jordan and he's healed. And the language is his skin is like that of a young boy. So he's made whole. He's renewed. Now the story cuts off right here. It goes on. Naaman is so overwhelmed with gratitude. He wants to bestow all these gifts on Elisha. And again, Elisha is not going to have any of it. And he finally says to Elisha, "Then can I take a little bit of dirt from your country back to my country? Just so I can have a reminder of this holy place." And he says, "Now I'm going to worship your God. I want some permission. If when I'm going with the king to worship, when the king bows, if I have to bow a little bit while he's bowing, that your God won't be offended by that." I mean, it's a very humble request. So Naaman is really put in his place, as it were, right? He becomes very deferential to Elisha because he's finally been cured of this skin disease. So there's all this language in the story about status, about homeland, about whose country is better than whose. The author from the very beginning makes it clear that God is not a God of boundaries. God doesn't care what country you come from, right? God works in Jordan, in Aram, just as much as God works in Samaria. But there's a sense of deferring to God, receiving instruction, being willing to be washed in a foreign river that makes the healing possible. Somehow ignoring status, crossing boundaries, that's the healing work that God does. So it's all there in the story. If you want healing, you have to be willing to cross some boundaries. You have to be willing to recognize that, yes, God's everywhere. Maybe God might be asking you to do something that seems beneath you, that may challenge your pride. Okay, so fast forward several hundred centuries, and you get to Jesus, and Jesus goes back to his hometown, and he's preaching a sermon to his people. And he says, again, and this is the thing that really gets them, right? Jesus says to his people, look, there were lots of people with skin diseases in Israel, and God chose to heal Naaman, a Syrian, instead of any of our people. He's reminding them of this story. He's reminding them that God doesn't care about countries, that God's not interested in our pride, that the healing actually in that story comes from people that Naaman considers beneath him. And it makes them so angry, they try to throw Jesus off a cliff. That's why we need to remember the story of Naaman, right? I mean, it was important to Jesus. It apparently was so powerful, such a challenge to the status quo, that Jesus's own people wanted to throw him off a cliff for it. So we need to tell this story. And that's why I love the story of Naaman. So there's the story. I would love to hear your reflections, responses to it. This notion to me, I think the thing that really gets me is this notion that it's actually by listening, turning against your own pride, listening to the voices of people that you consider beneath you, that makes healing possible. Love to hear your responses to that. Go ahead, Angela, you got your hand up.
I just wanted to start with a couple of responses in the chat that were responding to while you were talking. Camille says, Naaman sounds like someone who only believes a miracle could happen if you follow all these rules, like there's only one way to be saved. Everyone wants bells and whistles. If it's simple, how special can that make it? And Teresa says, a death-defying hero's quest would be more fitting for the ego than take a bath.
Thank you for both of those. I like that.
All I gotta say is God bless America. Because I mean, my God. I mean, like seriously, like no one, these people don't even read the Constitution to see that we're not even founded on the principles of religion, which is insane to me. I think there was one treaty that Jefferson negotiated. It was Marcel? Anyway, they were trying to get this treaty done between the United States and a Middle Eastern country, and the Middle Eastern country didn't want to do any business with us. Tripoli, yes. And they were like, well, we're not a Christian country. We're not. So let's do business. Like, this is what we've been saying since our creation, and people still get it twisted because of their inflated sense of who and what God is, and it makes absolutely no sense. Oh, infuriating.
Yeah, it says to me that God isn't restricted to our flavor of religion. I think one of the things that infuriated so many people with Jesus was he wasn't teaching exactly what they had heard their whole life, and it went against their base beliefs. And with this whole Naaman story, God wasn't restricted to working with the people of Israel. He did the miracle in Naaman's life, and it didn't matter where Naaman came from or what he had believed. It was what God wanted to do. And we try and put God in a box way too many times and want to believe that America is his chosen people and only does it our way.
Thanks for that. Yeah. Go ahead, Rob. You had your hand up.
I really like your point about, the humility as kind of the entrance condition here, right? But what was striking me, while you were recounting the story is that I've heard a lot of people who reduce it simply to obedience. And there's an interesting distinction that I don't know that I can fully expound, right? But we know that for a lot of people, there's this priority given to obedience in what is fundamentally an authoritarian way, right? And I'm interested in the idea that an obedience born of humility is actually different than that, right? But that feels like a very subtle thing, and I don't know what to do with it, except that it feels important.
And in addition to the fact that it took humility on the part of the powerful, it took boldness on the part of those who did not have power. You know, a little slave girl who is telling her owner what she needs to do. And then, shoot, I forgot my next line of thought. But, and then Naaman's slave who told him, you need to pay attention to this. It's not anything hard. Do it. And those two really had no right to speak up, yet they did it anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah.
I like going sort of connecting what Rob said to what Camille said. Camille pointed out that Naaman sounded like one of those people who thinks there's only one way to be saved. And the lens through which I was always taught this story, growing up, is that it was about faith and who had like enough faith. And it really squicks me out to think that, in fact, in that case, they were linking faith to obedience, which I mean, yes, there is a certain amount of that, but like toe the line, and then you'll get healed. That seems like the opposite of what's going on here. Because I mean, basically it seems sort of, he walked back into a country that he was trying to, oppress and steal from, and said, hey, help me,
Yeah.
Like that is humility. I mean, he had to learn how to take it to the next level, I guess.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
Teresa says, I really am impressed by the fact that there's an effort to save him instead of spitefully waiting on him to kick the bucket also. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and this is one of the situations where I do think in some way we see this dynamic between, and in this situation, Naaman is the oppressor, right? And it's about how is he going to get healing? And in some ways it's about, now again, there's not entirely a role reversal here. There's not reparations, right? But I think there's a message here about power and about how part of the thing that people need to be saved from is this sense of status and power differential. Go ahead, Rob.
I mean, we've talked before about the necessity of bringing a critical eye to the interpretation that we receive from these ancient people about what was going on with them, right? So what I immediately thought of when they say that the Holy One gave the victory, right, to Naaman, was this sort of like, okay, so clearly they lost a battle, and God had told them God was going to lead them to victory. So they're like, well, clearly they can't beat our God. So for whatever reason, God has seen fit to do this thing, and we're just going to have to figure out what's going on, and we got to get with the program, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they've got to give God credit for it, right? Blame/credit. And I mean, I feel that sort of connecting with what Megan is saying, actually, about, I really love the way she put this. It's the difference between, somehow it's the difference between this obedience that is born of some kind of understanding of humility versus towing the line. Maybe that's the thing that I was looking for earlier, is the sense that obedience in the authoritarian construct is purely coercive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you submit to it, you're submitting because you understand that you're being coerced. So I mean, is that humility, or is that just being overcome by superior force, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it feels important to recognize that obedience born of actual humility is different than just towing the line. I think that's really powerful.
Wow. I think it's a good point too, because like the only person in this story who has the power to say no is Naaman. Like he's the only person who could who could say, no, we're not going to do this. You know, I mean, and everything else is just like offered to him. His own slaves' words to him. Everything else is offered out of grace. He's the only person who has the power to say no. Anyway,
I'm just taken aback as to why, and fast forwarding to now, like these lessons aren't being taught in churches across not just America but the world. Like, and I'm thinking about every time people say the word, when Rob said critical, I'm like, oh, you're gonna go critical. And it's like, you know, the pushback on things like critical race theory is just the pushback on critical thinking in itself. Because like the fact that we don't want to teach the actual things that Jesus wanted us to know and learn goes to the way that we teach, well, the way that your relatives teach history.
Yeah. Yeah.
I only want the history to reflect my narrative and my interpretation to make me feel good, because God forbid someone else feels good. Like that's what I hear when I'm listening to this. Like he wanted something to make him feel good. You know, so I need to flash the lightning in the boom, and instead of just taking this as it was. And it's still, the more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess, because we're doing that right now.
Yeah. Well, and I think Tony's part of what you're saying is the extension of what, you know, Rob was saying. Like, people will hear this story and they just teach obedience. You need to do what God says. Just do, and it is that authoritarian top down. And even though the story, I think, is doing everything, like all the action is pushed forward by the people who don't have power. And yet when people tell the story, they're going to teach it from this top down perspective. Like, it's all about.
It also pushes back on something that I've said a lot, and I'm gonna sound a little hypocritical. Like, y'all know when I talk about the story of like the tornado destroying the town, yet God seeks to save the Bible. What if God seeking the Bible was the real miracle? God, I hope that that's not what you're doing. But that saving of that Bible is so minute and so minuscule that, you know, we want to see the town saved, but maybe the miracle is about, which I hope is not.
Theological horror.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? Like maybe that is, we always want miracles to be extraordinary, and you know, the flash and the boom, and that's not breathing, getting up in the morning. The fact that we were able to rise this morning is a miracle, and we should celebrate it as such.
I love the idea of ordinary miracles. That's awesome. Camille says, apropos of that, some Christian sects and other religions believe that they have the only correct way. They will always be in conflict with others who don't share their views. They will never find the peace they say they are after.
That's a good point. Yeah. Go ahead, Megan.
I think sort of what we're talking about here is, and the juxtaposition of the original Naaman story and Jesus talking about the Naaman story. It's sort of like, I mean, what Jesus is doing is subverting the narrative that's been passed down about what this story means in his time. And honestly, what Rob said about like the people you know, at the time the story was written, saying, well, God gave them that victory, you know, that's sort of a narrative in itself. And I mean, and we know that happens in the Old Testament, that they build a case for you know, well, we've talked about David, you know, his you know, royalty, you know, the propaganda essentially that's in there about him. And this could be a bit of propaganda, like, oh, you know, we were meant to lose the battle so that this one thing could happen. And maybe Jesus is even saying that narrative isn't right either, you know?
Right.
That this is not about the, you know, the sort of nationalistic picture. This is about what's happening in this individual and what it means in terms of like power imbalances.
Megan, in addition to that, Jesus' subversion was subversion by expansion, whereas the people that we fight against are subversion by minimizing and only making it look like them. It's like I've only heard a couple of trans theologians and Dave talk about the presence of eunuchs in the Bible and who they really were. And the people who talk about them in the opposite way have made God look like who they want God to be, which looks like them, instead of expanding. Like the subversion that we need to do today is subversion by expanding, because God has a very, very wide reach and a very wide narrative instead of the negative narrative that, conservatives want them to have.
I appreciate that. I think there's to connect kind of what you're saying to what Megan was saying. I think we can kind of hear when Jesus is talking to his people, like they've already taken the name and story. I mean, I'm making a guess. They've already taken the name and story and said, see, it's about the Jordan River's better than all the other rivers, when that's like the exact opposite. Like, it doesn't matter what river it is. I mean, Elisha's telling him to do this thing, and it's like, you have it, right? Except someone's read the story and said, yeah, our rivers are, the Jordan's special, and it makes me think about, like, when I have gone to Israel, Palestine, and Jordan and seen, like a lot of people go get baptized in the Jordan, and it's a special thing. I think pilgrimage is special, but then, and the attribution, like, oh, now you're really baptized. You got the special baptism, instead of the fact, oh yeah, like in Acts, let's get baptized in this ditch. Okay, let's do that. I mean, there's something about the importance of that humility, and it's not so much this water is magic anyway, or our nation is magic. So I'm sorry, Angela, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up a couple of comments in the chat. So Rob pointed out that Jesus is doing some critical race theory in the synagogue, and Megan says Jesus was fighting against oversimplification. Teresa says this is a little bit of a turn in the discussion, but regarding critical thought, thanks to what Rob was saying, I have a song stuck in my head now with the lyrics, "Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe." Those songs are a lot of the hardest bit of deprogramming that I have to get rid of. Mostly I can fight off certain ideas with critical thought, but jingles and slogans and other things are really stuck in there and can influence the way we behave and think in insidious ways, and can interfere with our ability to persuade. Those ideas are pervasive culturally. The narrative needs to be rewoven completely. I think that's why it's important to do things like shake up the liturgy, to think about how we refer to God, to make good music, etc.
Wow,
And
thanks for that.
Rob replies, they've had hundreds of years to decide what the name and story means. That doesn't have to make them uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. Thank you for both of those. And Teresa, you're 100%. I'm with you. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
But I was just going to say, in regard to jingles and songs and things, they do get stuck in your head. That's why they use jingles to sell stuff to people, right?
Yeah. Go ahead, Paula.
I'm giving a turn signal. I can't help but see how all of this is applying to all the political ads I'm having to watch on TV these days, where that simplistic narrative, that negative narrative is in all of them. Kay Ivey's Alabama is better than all the other states. We don't do things like other states ad. I mean, they're all attacking instead of including, and doing everything possible to preserve their way of living and identity instead of opening their arms to other possibilities. And I don't even want to turn the TV on these days because I get so angry listening to them, especially to Tim James.
God bless America.
I mean, isn't that what like sloganizing and making, just sort of distilling your message into this like, 3-minute ad or whatever. That's really long. Anyway. But like that is oversimplifying, and it makes us more comfortable, it makes, well, yeah, it's designed to make us more comfortable, and like it's easier to encompass the whole thing, like than something, I don't know, than actually thinking through the story.
No critical thinking allowed.
Right. It's oversimplifying the oversimplified. Like literally, it's wrong. It's like it's not even, it's wrong. Like this whole narrative is wrong. And they keep pushing it. I did a TikTok video yesterday because I was watching CNN, and this guy had a little baby on there. He's like, well, I'm not getting vaccinated. And she's not getting vaccinated. The reporter asked him why. This was his answer. Because I don't understand why people get the vaccination and still get COVID. Sir, that's not our problem that you didn't pass 8th grade. That's not our problem that you're not an epidemiologist and don't know how vaccines work. No one ever said that getting this vaccine was going to eliminate you from getting COVID. You won't die from COVID. But your understanding is the fact that, well, people still get COVID after they get the vaccine. Yes, that was explained from the beginning. If you were listening to people who were really telling you the truth, instead of these people trying to get y'all killed. Well, and that's my opinion. Nobody cares about your opinion. Yeah. Like, I don't care about people's opinions. I don't. And I had a talk with my boyfriend yesterday because I'm like, people get mad at me because they think I'm a know-it-all. But it's not that. You will never find me arguing a point that I'm not 100% sure that I know the correct answer. I'm not going to argue my opinions because my opinions are just such. They're my opinions. But I'm not going to sit around here and argue something that I'm not sure of. And so when people get this, well, you just want to be right all the time. Yeah, I do want to be right. Therefore, I'm not going to argue something that I might be wrong in. Like, I don't understand people. Like, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Thanks for that. Yeah. Paula, go ahead. You got your hand up. Oh, you're muted.
I said, I just forgot to put it down. My hand's not up.
Well, I want to say, I think, like I said, I think it's important to talk about this story because so many people don't know it. And it's also important, I think, to connect it to the Jesus story, because as Teresa, as you pointed out, I think the people who do know it often hear it preached as like, this is about obedience. This is about doing what God said. And there's something about the story and Jesus is retelling about it that makes it clear that this is a different perspective on God. It's one that makes, oops, I lost some power.
You're still with us.
Okay. It makes it really clear that this is a story about God challenging our notions of who God is, right? That the messages of God are coming through the people that we often discount, that it's meant to undercut things like nationalism, our sense of superiority, that kind of stuff, that there's something about what both this story, Naaman's story, and what Jesus is offering us that pretty much flips religion on its head. And I think that's the kind of God that we really want to worship. But let's go ahead. I feel like this is kind of a good place to go ahead and turn. I know we're a little bit early, but let's go back to our liturgy. And unless anyone has some last words that they want to offer. That's always a dangerous thing to say, actually. All right, let's go. Let's pull the liturgy back up.
I do want to say this before it close.
Please.
We started this. This is our 3rd year into this pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think over the last, in the last 2 months, like each month, I keep getting messages from people. I got one early. I'm not gonna call any names, but I just got a message from someone who's watching our broadcast, and I want to thank them for being able to listen to me and not get offended. I say a lot of things sometimes that I think, especially white people who have not checked their privilege, will get really, really offended with. But it's good because y'all are cool, like y'all are my people. But it's really refreshing and affirming for me to know that there are other people out there who are opening their eyes and can see the true meaning of what's being said without taking it personal. And I just want to thank them for that, because I literally just got a message from someone who's listening to us, and that just it means that this is working. That's all I want to say.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that.
All right. Living and creating God, your grace knows no borders. Help all people to find a home in your love. Amen. Right. Okay. You want me to finish, Rob?
Yeah. Am I supposed to do it wasn't in bold, so I got confused.
I'm sorry. My bad.
May the strength of God pilot us. May the power of God preserve us. May the wisdom of God instruct us. May the hand of God protect us. May the way of God direct us. May the shield of God defend us. May the host of God guard us against the snares of the evil ones, against temptations of the world. May Christ be with us. May Christ be before us. May Christ be in us. Christ be over all. May thy salvation, Lord, always be ours, this day, O Lord, and evermore. Amen. You're mute, Dave.
Thank you. If after 2.5 years, you'd think I'd have this like down, but apparently we all keep we all make the same mistakes.
The pandemic is new every morning.
It is. It is. Thank you all for worshiping with us today. Thanks to those of you on streaming. Again, if you're streaming on Facebook or YouTube, please like or just make a comment where you're watching from, so we have a way to count you. Thanks for being with us. And there's my son walking in the background. There you go. Glad to have y'all with us. Those of you on Zoom, if you'll stick with us for just a minute more, we'll stop the stream.